This is the Goodwill Parochial School. What you will hear are reflections from various alumni and students who have attended this great landmark in Sumter County. As you go through the narratives of this great documentary, you will find and learn some things what legends and great individuals are made of. What we all have benefited throughout the United States, it was from this firm foundation of the Goodwill School. This is indeed a true Carolina landmark. The Goodwill School is the root of all the fabrics of the families of all of these communities who attended here, got their foundation, and it was a place of unifying and bringing these families, these different families from the various communities around here together, and it was for a common good. In a modern term, it was this huge village.
Goodwill School was one of the mission schools that were started under the church, really, the Presbyterian Church. And this was one of many parochial schools that the church started all over the country. There were communities where there were not public school and public education for African Americans. And of course, this school was connected to the Goodwill Presbyterian Church.
In 1867, 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, the Northern Church sent missionaries to the South to organize schools and churches for the newly freed slaves. And some of those missionaries came to this part of South Carolina. And that's how the Goodwill Church and the Goodwill School was established by Northern missionaries who came south for that purpose. And so when the school was established in 1867, of course, as has been said, it lasted until the 60s when it was closed. But there was a very close connection between the church and the school throughout those years, because the principal of the Goodwill Church also was the pastor of the Goodwill Church.
The foundation of all of this was prayer, scripture.
When we met every day, we had devotion, and after devotion, during devotion, we could see our friends, our brothers and our sisters, and kind of communicate then, because once we got into the classrooms, it was all on academics.
Certainly there was a connection between the academic part of the child's upbringing and the religious education also. And so you had those two things going together. And so the fact that the church's pastor was principal, and all the teachers, most of them who worked here, some of them, of course, lived in the community, and they also attended the church. And so the children were exposed to both the religious education and also the academic education. And that really helped, I think, to give them a solid footing and a good background that helped them to really be successful in the years that followed.
You come into the chapel, we call this building, this room, the chapel. Come into the chapel, and then Our principal, Reverend Nelson, who was my pastor also, he would pray and then we would sing song. I think we learned about every hymn in the hymnal. And then after that, he would tell us what he had to say about the good things, about what we do and the bad as well. And after that, we marched to our classroom. We didn't walk out the chapel. Mr. Nelson would play this little tune, this little march, do 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 do. Very nice, and everybody learned to march straight to their classroom.
I remember the most being here, being in Professor Couple's classroom. He was very strict. He didn't allow you to talk in his classroom, and you had to learn Bible verses. And I remember one day he told us we had to learn the 23rd Psalm. And you had so much work to do and had to walk so far to school. And then when you get home, you had to work. And when time to study at night, you'd be tired. So they tell me to put my Bible under my head. And that way I would learn. I could learn the 23rd Psalm, but it didn't work. I come to school the next day. I couldn't go out to play. Had to stay upstairs. And the next morning, I knew that Bible, 23rd Psalm, and I know it this day.
So the Goodwill Church, primarily all of the students who went here, most of them were members of the Goodwill Church. Some, of course, came from Mayesville, which is not very far from here, and other areas. I had some relatives who walked from across the swamp. The congruity community, before there was a school there, to their school. So it served the surrounding area, I would say 3 to 4 miles, maybe even 5 miles, as a radius of students walking to the school.
We had to walk to school. Some of us walked to school 4 and 5 miles. We had to walk all the way from Scottsville down here to school. And at that time, we didn't have the option of riding the school bus. Only the white kids rode the school bus. They would ride the school bus and throw paper out the window at us while we were walking to school.
We didn't have lunch at the school there. And what I did was I hung my lunch up on a tree until I get back home. So we have some needles on the road going back. We hang up on a tree in the woods. We lived 5 miles from there. I hung my lunch, maybe a sweet potato, either a biscuit with some syrup and cheese on a tree until we got back on the road and I got my lunch out of the tree.
And those persons sometimes who had to ride to school on a wagon, and my dad brought me on wagon, he would put coals in a bucket to keep us warm on the back of the wagon until we got to school.
Folks walked from all around this area to Goodwill parochial school. During those times, Dr. Nelson, who was the principal, had that front office over there with a leather strap and a chair that if you did something wrong, you had to put your leg up and then he'd tan you pretty good with that strap. And I think most of us got a little piece of that, whether we wanted it or not.
I can start by Dr. Nelson. He wasn't the principal then. I think his wife, Miss Lily B, was the principal, but he was like the guardian of the castle. So we, the young boys, used to sneak out of class and try to outrun him, but for some reason he had mathematical logistic or something. So he would always know where we would end up, and we would run all through the woods, and he would be leaning upside a tree once we run out of the woods. There he was.
And one day, Mayor Ricks, my girlfriend, and Jesse Isaac, Mary Ricks had a nickel. And she asked us, let's slip off and go to the store, Dab's store. And we went to the Dab's store. We thought we did. Nobody's first couple didn't see us, but he did. But when we got back after recess, we had to line up in the front, march in. He called us name by name, step aside. We went upstairs. Boy, he put it on us. And then that Sunday, I knew he was gonna tell my mama. I couldn't enjoy church watching him and my mother. But when my mother got hold to it, that was it.
Teachers had control over their class at that time. If they had good discipline in it, because they realized the fact that if you didn't have an environment where you could learn, learning could not take place. And so they had discipline in there. We got individual attention. They knew the names of everybody. They knew the parents of everybody. And if you misbehave, they made sure that they let your parents know you misbehave.
This room that I am in now is the room that I spent my first day in school in. And I can remember my first day and second day of school, even to today, because the first day that I attended the school here, I cried all day long. And the second day I came to school, I taught all day long. And when I graduated from school in 12 years later, my principal remembered my first day and my second day because he told me about it. And that was the most experienced thing to me. He remembered me individually from all the students that he had dealt with during those years.
One thing that you had a community involved in the school. You had parents who were concerned about their children getting an education. And these schools came as a result of the end of slavery, where blacks really couldn't get an education, couldn't go to public school. Teachers who taught in schools like these made little money. They didn't get the kind of monies that other teachers were getting who were white in the public school. But at the same time, they were dedicated, committed teachers, and they made sure that they inspired the students, and students were anxious to come to school and learn.
I had a favorite high school teacher, which was Hardy C. Cooper. We call him Professor Hardy C. Cooper. And he was a strict, and he was an excellent math teacher. And I used to do all my homework, but there was one time that something happened and I didn't get it done. And I came to school that morning. We had these chalkboards, used to call them then blackboards. And they were located all around this room. And when I got to school, I must have forgotten my homework. And he scolded me at that time. And what did I do? I sat down and put my head on the desk and cried. And he used to call me Alice all the time. And he said, "What's wrong with Alice?" But I didn't say anything after that. But he was a very good teacher.
Some of the fondest memory, I guess, going out in the woods and getting kindling wood to start the fires, and we would stay out there until the school time for school to close, and we would play out there in the road sometime and shoot marbles, we would box and do things that the people thought we were looking for wood, but we got in the wood and we were out there playing the hooky until time for school to close.
Some of the stuff we would do as little boys, in the classroom, we would run and try to get in the back so we could plunk the boy in the head in front of us and get a beating anyway by the teacher. But those are some of the things. I can remember you hear Al Sharpton talked about these days where you would come home and find a blueberry pie in the exit and blueberries all over your face. Well, we had a mulberry tree outside. And most of the time during lunch hour, we would go out there, and I think we would feast on the mulberry. We'd come back in hand blue, mouth blue, and everything from eating mulberry during lunchtime.
And the highlight of everything where this oak tree, kind of like where this oak tree's out that window, was a huge mulberry tree. And that mulberry tree got a lot of us in trouble because we really, and back beyond, there was a row of hedge. There were some fruit trees, and those fruit trees got a lot of us in trouble because we were slipping, get stuff off the trees. And run around in the hayfield ducking and hiding from Miss Nelson and Reverend Nelson.
And we used to run around in the hallway looking for the boys at that time also. And it was just a lot of fun going from room to room, but we couldn't really stand there and communicate because our teachers were after us to concentrate on the work that was being presented. So we did have some fun, and for the bathrooms or the outdoor toilets was in the back there, and the boys would often go to theirs and the girls to theirs, and that's when we were trying to, kind of look at the boys or play with the boys or yell at the boys. And Cornell Hampton, Reverend Hampton, mentioned that earlier about the boys having fun and playing. We were looking at them also, but we couldn't let it be known because he and I were in the same grade at that time.
Was there a little romance at all?
I wouldn't say that right now, but I think it was when we became in high school, I believe, if he will agree. And my husband is not here either, and I'm quite sure he'll agree with me.
And we had practically everything that any other school would have, but it was something that was a little different. We didn't have a gymnasium and these kind of things here. We played on a dirt court outside. One of our famous players, Jeff Hyde, is sitting right there by the window. And I started watching him when he was playing basketball, and I said, I was going to be a basketball player just like Jeff. And I started playing basketball on the dirt court out there and got to be a pretty good basketball player.
I was rated as one among the better basketball players in the school. And I remember one of my games, the best game that I played was my junior year in high school. I scored 30 points in the playing outdoor on the dirt. And that was a remarkable game of my life.
I participated on the basketball team under Miss Hutley. And I was like the little mascot because all the others were grown adults, but they allowed me to tug along, and I learned how to play. And as I moved on into high school, I was a member of the basketball team.
I remember playing basketball, how we traveled, and I had to play forward, and we traveled to many schools, and we had a #1 basketball team. And when I went to college, I played basketball in college.
We had baseball. We played across the road in front of the church during recess hour.
But I remember we used to go out in the backyard when and Dr. Nelson had some cows and stuff. And we go out there where it had a little field, and we had rubber balls, and we made our bats. And you had to play ball out there and make sure you didn't step in some of the manure that was out there in the yard as well.
Some of the other things we did, we were like different doing. As little boys, some of us brought our fishing line to school. We had a little fishing line and fishing hook. There was a little pond in the back. And during recess, we would go down to this little pond and try to catch a fish. And when we did, we would give it to a lady by the name of Mercedes. She was in the kitchen to try to get her to cook it. Well, we didn't catch many fish, but we had fun.
We had this was sort of like the chapel. We had some of the best plays that Ms. Nelson and others who put together. Every year we did that. And I remember we did a play, the last play that I participated in here in this building was a play entitled T for Tom. I played the role as Tom in that particular play. And I remember I had to memorize a speech for 140 times that I had to speak during that play, and I said I couldn't do it. I remember Ms. Nelson saying, "Yeah, you can do it, you're gonna do it."
I was in a play called What's the Matter with Sally? And I was Sally in the play, and I remember that quite well. And my parent was, my father especially, he was very supportive of us. Every time we were involved in something, well, my mother wasn't too well, but my father, I don't care what we were involved in, he would be here.
Ethel, my cousin, and I was Ken and she was Kent. And we had to get up right in this auditorium right here and sing that song. And Miss Nelson said, you better sing it, and you better sing it right. And my mom and daddy were sitting right in the back there. And they were so proud because I did my part. I sang can't and can. And I remember that little activity.
And you couldn't put that word can't in your vocabulary. It was you will do it. Can't was not acceptable.
Every holidays or every special days, we had a special program here celebrating that day. And then during May Day, during the month of May, we have a May Day program where all the parents would come to the school, and we had dances and different activities going on to entertain the parents.
We had a pageant, and we did a fundraiser here in the school, but we had the pageant over at the Goodwill Presbyterian Church. And I don't know how we did it, but I raised enough money to be crowned the little queen of my class. And I got to walk down the aisle with what was my little boyfriend at that time. We call him Newt. I think his name, I don't even remember his real name. I think it's Willie the Same. And I was grinning from ear to ear because my mom had made me a pretty little dress, and I was in hog heaven, okay? I had a boyfriend strutting down the church aisle, and you know where my mind went. But it was quickly brought back to reality, okay? That was something through the years. I told my granddaughter about it, you know, and she was like, Granny, you are something else. Yes, that was the crowning moment for me.
When I had our banquet in the 12th grade, that was the most embarrassing thing. The other girls, you know, their boyfriend would bring them to the banquet. My father brought me to the banquet. And then the children would laugh at me, say, oh, he doesn't trust you. But it wasn't that. And to this day, I respect them for the way they brought us up. They didn't turn us loose. I had strict parents.
I was the last class here before going over to Eastern High School. I went to Eastern High School in 7th grade.
Well, basically, we had the parochial school. We were not participating in the public schools, and because of the Supreme Court decision in 1954, the Board of Brown versus the Board of Education, then the law came in separate but equal. And that meant the state had to go and build some schools. And so the state built a school in Sumter County called Eastern High School for the African American kids, and built a high school known as Maywood High School for the white kids. And all of the kids, the students, that we had a bunch of small schools throughout Sumter County, black schools. And so what happened then, when the decision, Supreme Court made the decision, they built the high school for most of the kids were going to the small schools. And so we left Goodwill. If we were in the high school, we left Goodwill and went over to Eastern High School. The elementary school remained, and that was in 1955, the fall of 54, 55, when we went over to Eastern High School. The Goodwill remained as an elementary school until 1960, and then all of the students in this area went over to Eastern High School. It was a high school and an elementary school, but the elementary school remained open until 1960. But all of the students who were in high school in Sumter County were attending small schools, and the Goodwill community, the St. John community, the Congruent community, Mayesville community went over to Eastern High School at that time because of the decision made by the Supreme Court.
Everyone was excited because we saw what we saw was that some improvement and advancement, because we saw things at Eastern that we could receive that we weren't getting at Goodwill. But we still truly had our passion for Goodwill because Goodwill was the original start of everything. But we enjoyed going to Goodwill. To Eastern, we remember the past here at Goodwill.
And I was told by one of the members of the church, Mr. Mood Cooper, when I came here, he told me about how the men went down in the swamps and how they cut and they hewed the lumber to build the school, the foundation of it. And in fact, when Hugo came through in 1989, one of the greatest storms that ever came through this area, it did not really bother this church, this school at all, because of the foundation that it's on. And there were very few nails, understand, that was placed in the school, in this foundation. The way they hewed out the lumber and put it all together, it was really a touch of genius in terms of back then they had no architectural, I guess, design and so forth, but that was all done manually by the men who built the foundation for the school.
It was a huge village of love, nurturing, and caring. And for me, that has rolled over even in my adult years. There are so many of us who have benefited from this foundation, and we will continue to benefit. And it was one generation just passing over knowledge, learning, discipline, trust, faith to the next generation. And I do believe what we are doing here with restoration of this building, kids, heirs of all of these fine families who made up the fabric of this community and church family, it will be a living legacy that we won't forget about.
It is going to help another generation to understand some of the things that we who made such good progress here went through in order to get an education. And that should be a remarkable thing for them to remember and to experience through our actions and so forth.
I believe that a lot of our kids need to know that they're riding on a bus or on a train and haven't paid for their ticket yet. This is the ticket that started them to ride on the train.
I just hope that this old building will continue to stand and that it is such a historical monument for not only my life, but for so many others. And I just hope that it will continue.
I think that I shall never see a poem as lovely as a tree that may in summer wear a nest of robins in her hair. Poems are made by fools like me, but only God can make a tree.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pasture. He restoreth my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness. When he say, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me, present of mine enemy. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.